In the spring of 1895, when a cattleman named William Dorsett purchased 160 acres of farmland outside what is now Guthrie, Oklahoma, he made a discovery that would haunt the territory for decades. The soil was too soft in certain patches. When his plow caught on something hard, he expected a rock. Instead, he unearthed a human ribcage wrapped in burlap and wire. By the end of that week, authorities had recovered 17 bodies from the property, but the farmer who worked that land the year before had vanished without a trace. The land in question sat 3 miles west of Guthrie, along a stretch of prairie that territorial records identified as Claim 447. It had been registered to a man named Silas Werner in April 1893, just months after the land run opened the territory to settlement. According to the Territorial Land Office, Werner had paid the standard filing fee and submitted the required documentation proving his intent to cultivate the property. Nothing about his claim raised suspicion. Local accounts from that first year painted Werner as an unremarkable figure. A general store ledger from Guthrie shows he purchased seed, tools, and basic provisions every 2 weeks through the summer of 1893. The storekeeper, a man named Jacob Finch, later told investigators that Werner spoke little and always paid in cash. He arrived in town alone and left alone. No one recalled seeing him with family or hired help. But there was something else Finch remembered during his second interview with authorities. Werner had purchased the same items repeatedly, week after week. 50 pounds of seed corn, 20 pounds of wheat seed, garden vegetable seeds. Yet Finch never saw evidence that Werner actually planted anything. When other farmers came to town, they talked about their crops, complained about weather, asked advice about soil conditions. Werner never mentioned his planting at all. He simply bought seeds, paid, and left. Finch assumed Werner was planting, but failing. Now he wondered if the seeds had ever gone into the ground at all. The first disappearance connected to Werner's property occurred in August 1893. A drifter named Thomas Holcomb, who had been working odd jobs around Guthrie, accepted an offer of farm work from a man matching Werner's description. Holcomb told the boarding house owner he would return in 3 days. He never did. When questioned in 1895, the boarding house owner remembered the detail because Holcomb had left behind his only pair of good boots, something no drifter would abandon willingly. Throughout the fall of 1893, 5 more men went missing under similar circumstances. Each had been seen speaking with Werner in town. Each had mentioned taking work on a farm west of Guthrie. Each had disappeared without collecting wages or retrieving personal belongings. The Territorial Marshal's office received reports, but in a region flooded with transients and opportunists, missing drifters rarely warranted investigation. People moved on. Or so everyone assumed. A letter discovered in the Guthrie post office in 1895 provided the first written account of what might have happened on Werner's land. The letter, addressed to a woman in Kansas City but never mailed, was found tucked behind a sorting shelf. It was written by a man named Robert Chenoweth and dated October 12, 1893. The relevant portion read as follows: I have taken employment with a farmer 3 miles west of town. The work is hard, but the pay is fair. Something troubles me about this place, though. The soil in the back 40 has a strange smell, like rust and rot together. The farmer will not let me work those fields. He plows them himself at night. I have seen him from the barn window, walking behind his mule in the dark. He does not carry a lantern. Chenoweth never mailed the letter. His body was the 9th one recovered from the property. The pattern of Werner's activities became clearer as investigators pieced together testimonies from Guthrie residents. A blacksmith recalled repairing a plow blade for Werner in November 1893. The blade had been damaged in an unusual way, bent and nicked as if it had struck bone repeatedly. When the blacksmith mentioned this, Werner explained he had hit rocks, but the blacksmith noticed no dirt on the blade. Only dark stains that did not wash away with water. The blacksmith's apprentice, a boy of 15, later told investigators something his employer had not mentioned. After Werner left the shop, The boy had been instructed to dispose of the water used to cool the repaired blade during hammering. The water had turned dark red. The boy thought it was rust, but when he dumped it behind the shop, dogs from the street came immediately and began licking the ground where it had spilled. They became agitated, circling and whining. One dog refused to leave the spot for 2 days. A woman who sold eggs in Guthrie remembered Werner purchasing lime in quantities far exceeding what any farmer would need for soil treatment. When she asked what he intended to do with so much lime, he told her he was treating a disease in his crops. But Werner had no crops. Multiple witnesses confirmed his fields remained largely unplanted through both growing seasons. Only the back 40 acres showed signs of cultivation, and even there nothing ever grew. The lime purchases continued through the winter of 1893. The woman's sales ledger showed Werner bought lime every 3 weeks from August through February. The total amount exceeded 300 pounds. She remembered asking why he needed so much during winter when nothing was growing. Werner told her he was preparing the soil for spring planting. When spring came, he stopped buying lime. He also stopped coming to town. Winter brought a temporary halt to the disappearances, but they resumed in March 1894. This time, Werner's victims included a family. The Pritchard family, settlers from Missouri, had been traveling to stake their own claim when their wagon broke an axle on the road near Werner's property. A witness saw Werner offer them shelter while they made repairs. The family consisted of George Pritchard, his wife Margaret, and their 2 sons, ages 12 and 9. They were last seen entering Werner's property on March 18, 1894. The broken wagon was found abandoned on the roadside 3 days later, its contents untouched. The territorial marshal who investigated the wagon's abandonment in 1894 noted something in his report that took on new meaning after the bodies were discovered. The wagon's contents included clothing, tools, and food supplies, but also a family Bible with birth records, marriage certificate, and land grant papers. No family would willingly abandon documents that proved their legal identity and land rights. These were not items you left behind to retrieve later. They were items you protected above all else. Now something needs to be understood about the way Werner chose his victims. Investigators who studied the case noted a pattern. He selected people who would not be missed quickly. Drifters with no local connections. Travelers passing through. Men who lived on the margins of society. The Pritchard family represented a departure from this pattern, and it may have been the mistake that eventually brought attention to his activities. Margaret Pritchard's brother, a railroad supervisor in Kansas, began sending inquiries to the territorial marshal's office in April 1894 when the family failed to arrive at their destination. Unlike the disappearances of nameless drifters, this inquiry came from someone with resources and connections. The marshal's office sent a deputy to investigate. The deputy's report, filed on May 2, 1894, noted that Werner's property appeared abandoned. The house stood empty. Tools lay scattered in the barn. The mule was gone. Most significantly, the deputy observed that the back 40 acres showed signs of recent plowing despite the absence of any planted crops. The soil in those fields appeared darker than the surrounding prairie, almost black in certain patches. The deputy noted an unpleasant odor but attributed it to natural decomposition of prairie grass. The deputy also recorded a detail that seemed insignificant at the time. He found a plow sitting in the middle of the back 40, abandoned mid-furrow. The blade was clean, too clean, as if someone had taken great care to wash it thoroughly before walking away. Next to the plow lay a pair of work gloves. They were stiff with dried blood. Because no evidence of foul play was immediately visible, and because Werner had apparently abandoned his claim, the investigation went no further. The property reverted to territorial ownership and was eventually sold to William Dorsett in early 1895. What Dorsett discovered when he began working the land defied immediate explanation. The bodies were not buried in any conventional sense. They had been plowed into the soil itself, incorporated into the earth like fertilizer. Some were layered at different depths, suggesting they had been turned under multiple times as Werner worked the fields. The territorial coroner who examined the remains reported that all showed evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. All had been wrapped in burlap, secured with wire. All had been treated with lime to accelerate decomposition. The coroner's full report, sealed at the time but later released, contained disturbing observations about the condition of the remains. The bodies had not decomposed naturally. The lime had done its work, but something else had affected the remains in ways the coroner could not explain. The bones showed unusual discoloration, as if stained by the soil itself. More troubling, several of the skeletons were incomplete. Small bones were missing, finger bones, toe bones, teeth. The coroner suggested animals might have scattered them, but the larger bones showed no evidence of animal disturbance. The small bones had simply vanished. But the discovery that disturbed investigators most had nothing to do with the bodies themselves. In the back corner of Werner's barn, deputies found a journal. It contained no confession, no explanation, only measurements and observations recorded in precise, methodical handwriting. The entries spanned from May 1893 to March 1894. They read like agricultural notes. Back 40, Section 3, turned under 2 loads today. Soil composition improving. Dark earth developing as expected. Another entry. Section 7 now fully saturated. Moisture retention excellent. No visible signs on surface. Earlier entries in the journal revealed Werner's process in clinical detail. He had divided the back 40 into numbered sections, each approximately 4 acres. He recorded the depth of his plowing, the spacing of his furrows, and the intervals between turnings. One entry from July 1893 read, "Turned Section 2 for the 3rd time. Material now completely integrated. Surface texture normal. Tested sample between fingers. Consistency good." The journal's final entry, dated March 20th, 1894, 2 days after the Pritchard family disappeared, contained only one line. "The soil remembers everything we give it. Werner was never found." Territorial authorities circulated his description throughout Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. They checked land office records for any new claims filed under his name. They questioned railroad conductors and ferry operators. No trace of him emerged. He had vanished as completely as his victims. The investigation into Werner's possible fate uncovered one troubling detail. A land office clerk in Oklahoma City reported that in late March 1894, a man matching Werner's description had inquired about available claims in the Cherokee Outlet, a section of territory that had opened to settlement just 6 months earlier. The clerk remembered the man because of an unusual question he had asked. He wanted to know which areas had the poorest soil quality. When the clerk asked why anyone would want bad farmland, the man explained that he preferred to improve soil himself. He enjoyed the process of transformation. Whether this was actually Werner remains unconfirmed. No claim was ever filed under his name in the Cherokee Outlet. But in the years following the discovery on his Guthrie property, authorities in other parts of Oklahoma Territory began reviewing unsolved disappearances near newly settled farmland. The pattern was uncomfortably familiar. Isolated properties, missing drifters, farmers who worked their fields at night. Between 1895 and 1900, territorial marshals identified at least 4 other properties where similar circumstances existed. Farms with no visible crops, unusually dark soil in specific fields, owners who had disappeared without notice. In each case, investigation revealed the property had been abandoned before authorities could examine it closely. In each case, the back acreage showed signs of intensive cultivation, but no actual farming. None of these properties were excavated. The territorial government decided that the cost and manpower required could not be justified without direct evidence of wrongdoing. The Dorsett property, as it became known, was never successfully farmed again. Dorsett himself abandoned the land within a year of his discovery. He told the territorial newspaper that crops would not grow in the back 40, regardless of what he planted. Seeds would sprout and then wither within days. Even prairie grass refused to reclaim the soil. The land remained barren, a black scar visible from the road. In 1897, a researcher from the Agricultural College in Stillwater came to study the soil composition. His findings were never officially published, but his notes survived in the college archives. The soil in the back 40 contained nutrient levels far beyond what occurred naturally. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium measured at concentrations that should have created ideal growing conditions. Yet nothing would grow. The researcher's notes contained one observation he could not explain. Samples taken from different sections of the back 40 tested identically, as if the soil had been uniformly mixed to exact specifications over the entire acreage. This level of precision seemed impossible for one man working with primitive equipment. Local residents began avoiding the property after dark. Reports emerged of strange occurrences. Travelers on the road near the property reported hearing the sound of a plow cutting through earth, though the field stood empty. Others claimed to see a figure walking behind a mule in the moonlight, following the same path over and over. These accounts were dismissed as superstition, the kind of stories that spring up around places associated with violence. But the reports continued. In 1902, a group of surveyors mapping the area for a proposed railroad route camped near the old Werner property. Their official report made no mention of unusual activity, but a letter from one surveyor to his wife described waking in the night to find all their surveying stakes uprooted and arranged in rows, as if something had plowed through their camp while they slept. The property changed hands several times over the following decades. No one kept it long. The pattern was always the same. New owners would attempt to farm the land. Nothing would grow in the back 40. Strange sounds would be heard at night. The property would be abandoned again. By the 1920s, the old Werner house had collapsed into ruin. The barn followed soon after. The land became a patch of darkness on otherwise productive prairie, a hole in the landscape that refused to heal. Locals called it the Dead 40, though most had forgotten why. In 1934, during the Dust Bowl, something happened that brought renewed attention to the property. While farms across Oklahoma saw their topsoil blow away in massive dust storms, the soil on the old Werner property remained fixed in place. Farmers in the area noticed that dust clouds seemed to split around the back 40, as if the air itself refused to touch that ground. A photographer from a government soil conservation team captured an image showing this effect. The photograph shows a dust storm approaching from the west, its dark wall extending across the entire horizon except for one gap, a 40-acre gap exactly where the old Werner property stood. The property still exists today, though it has been subdivided and partially developed. A storage facility occupies the northern section. A used car lot covers what was once the house site, but the back 40 remains untouched. Zoning maps list it as environmentally unsuitable for construction, though no official explanation for this designation appears in public records. The soil composition is listed only as anomalous. Last year, during a drought, the current owner of the back 40 noticed something unusual. Patches of darker soil had become visible in patterns across the property. Not random patches, rows. Perfectly straight rows running north to south, exactly as they would if someone had been plowing. The owner contacted the County Agricultural Extension Office. They took samples, but never released results. And 3 weeks ago, a construction crew working on the adjacent property reported their equipment malfunctioning. Specifically, a backhoe blade bent while digging a foundation trench near the property line. The operator said it felt like the blade had struck bone. When they examined the soil from the trench, they found it unusually dark, almost black, and it had a smell they couldn't quite place, like rust and rot together. The county ordered a halt to construction pending environmental assessment. That was 18 days ago. No one from the county has visited the site since. The construction equipment still sits idle next to the trench. But something happened 4 nights ago that the construction company hasn't reported yet. Their site supervisor drives past the property each evening on his way home. He swears that last Tuesday, just after sunset, he saw furrows in the back 40 that weren't there that morning. Fresh furrows. And at the far end of the field, barely visible in the failing light, he saw something that made him drive away without stopping. A figure, walking behind something, following the same path, back and forth, turning the earth.